basically what we're going to do is we're going to talk about solar. This is the PV 101, and so it's, you know, how does solar work? What's the latest in the solar technology? You know, how does it interface with your home? This is not an off-grid class. Everything that we will be talking about will be for grid tied. We'll get into a battery discussion, how your solar and grid grid tied batteries can work. We won't talk too much about commercial stuff. It's mostly residential, but a lot of the same things that we'll be talking about will apply to commercial. We are not here to sell you any particular product. We are not here to give you, talk about any pricing or anything. We're happy to speak to people individually about their projects. But this is mostly just an education. If we were at the actual SolarFest, you could come over to our table and then we could, fill you in on selling you what we have to offer. But what we're going to do today is basically just talk about how solar works, how it can work for you, and then also how batteries will tie in with that. So Danielle, if you want to go to the next slide. So I will give you a brief introduction about myself. I was a custom furniture maker for years and volunteering at SolarFest for 20 years. And when my wife and I moved to Dorset so that our daughters would go to the high school here, we were going to SolarFest every year, volunteering, because we just said, what an amazing thing this is that you have world music powered by the sun, and amazing workshops. Then when our daughters left for college, we said, all right, where do we want to live? And as it turns out, we wanted to live right where we were. But now that we knew that we wanted to be there, we said, let's put up the solar panels. So we went to SolarFest that year, talked to a number of contractors, hired a local contractor, put up the solar, and then said, all right, we need to teach all our friends and neighbors about this. So we threw a party, and the company that installed them said, Bill, you need to come work with us. And I said, okay, I'll do that. So that's how I started in solar, worked with them for a couple of years, and then I really wanted to get into the battery side of it. That's why I wanted to do solar. So we started my own company, Grassroots Solar. And so I will let Danielle introduce herself and how she got here.
And I'm Danielle Laberge. I'm Bill's daughter. And so I grew up going to SolarFest, of course. And when I went to college, my focus was environmental studies and ecology specifically. I did some work for the National Park Service in Grand Canyon and the New York DEC. And when those organizations were no longer hiring because of the hiring freeze after the recession, I started looking around for what else could be applicable. And when my father got into solar, he was having such a blast that I said, when can I come join you? And got my NABCEP certification. We're both NABCEP certified professionals, and I came to work on doing solar sales and technical design for Grassroots Solar, and I've been doing that for 4 years now.
And so when people are looking to get into solar, I would suggest that you see what certifications the installer has. Now it seems like if we want to do Panasonic solar modules, we need to become a Panasonic authorized installer. We're a Sunpower authorized installer. We are Sonnen. So each of the technologies now, or each of the companies are requiring training. But we're also getting our whole crew NABCEP certified. NABCEP is the National North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners. So it's a national certification. In some states, Vermont does not require certification to put in solar. They started talking about it for a while, but they do have what they call an S license now for electricians, which is like a solar license, which is the closest that they get in Vermont to needing a certification. So it's a national certification, and we think it's important that everybody have all that.
So we're gonna do a we're going to be focused on solar that is tied to your local electric grid. And so the basic process is that light is going to hit the solar panels, convert that into DC power on your roof, and then either on the roof or at a combiner, that power is converted into AC, which can be used by your house, and also can be exported to the grid through your meter, at which point you are credited for that excess electricity that is sucked out into the grid. Net metering is just that process of counting everything that's produced and consumed at your meters and netting it out on your bill.
So we're going to talk about the various ways that you can have solar on your property. Everybody has a different situation, so we need to look at whether you can do it on the roof or the ground. In this particular case, here's a roof-mounted array. The roof is the easiest and least expensive setup because the structure's right there. So we can put up the solar, we can run a conduit down and attach it to your electricity, and boom, you're good to go. So that's the least expensive. There are limitations with that. Obviously, the size of the roof is going to determine it, and also your roof may not be at the right angle and facing the right direction. So we typically, when we do a site evaluation, we're going to get the dimensions of your roof, and we're going to see how much solar can we put on there. And then based on the pitch of your roof and the direction it's facing, along with the longitude and latitude, we'll be able to say, a 6 kilowatt system on this roof is going to produce X amount of kilowatt hours. So there's some limitations just based on the size of it. One other limitation that we have is we tend to build our systems with, there's setbacks on the edges and along the ridge for firefighters. A lot of jurisdictions, if you don't have setbacks like that, the firefighters say they're not going to go up on a roof if there's no setbacks. So it's a firefighting issue. It's not code in every state. It's getting there, but and some jurisdictions will allow you if it's on the backside of a building, so the firefighters can have access to the front. They'll give you a variance, but that's one of the considerations when we're on the roof. Is the setbacks.
Yeah, and then we also have several different options. If your roof is not suitable, you could consider a ground-mounted array, and there are several types of ground mount that are possible. The most cost-effective and modular is the fixed array, so we can make it whatever size needed to offset your electric use, and it has a steel frame. They can either have concrete piles or helical ground screws that are like screwed in with a really big auger, or pile driven steel beams. And the main benefit of this system is if you have a big sunny field, we put it on the north side of the field facing south with a nice long sunny run up to it, and they can be really productive in that situation. And then
I just had someone had a question in the chat room about doing solar on a slate roof, and we have a lot of slate roofs in Vermont. We actually will not work on a slate roof. There is a company out of Boston that has some really interesting hardware now that will allow, you can cut up your slate and slide it up in there. We tend to stay away from slate rooftops just because we're only putting, however many penetrations for the rails, but we have to lay our ladder across the whole roof. And I really don't want to just ruin somebody's, the slate on there. So we have tended to stay away from any slate rooftops.
And the attachments to attach to slate roofs are incredibly costly. So I have not compared the cost to ground mounts, but I have compared the cost to other roof mounts, and it is unfavorable based on the cost of the attachments. And then you have to get someone to cut the slate in order to put the attachments in. So, but part of the ground mount cost that is not included in a roof mount is that we do have a conduit that has to be trenched and run with copper wire out to your power supply, either your meter or the closest electric pole. So you do have to think when you're, placing a ground mount, where is the power supply? How am I getting there? And if it's further than 200 feet, that's a very thick copper wire. So it does add to your project cost. So the second type of mount is a pole mount. So these are a little bit higher up the ground, smaller footprint. You can fit up to 15 panels on one pole, but there are also multi-pole options. So you can have 2 poles with a fixed array supported between them. These poles are also fixed facing one compass direction, but they can be manually adjusted for vertical tilt, so you can tilt them flatter in the summer for a better angle of production, and steeper in the winter to shed snow and catch more sun when the sun is lower in the sky.
This particular setup, we're working with this group, the Regenerative Food Network, and talking about doing solar grazing. And this type of array, as I was just saying, you can actually have 2 or 3 poles together in one array. And so you'll be able to tilt that whole array. And it also is a perfect height for allowing your sheep to graze underneath it. And it's actually beneficial to the soil. You end up with dual use for the land. So we're starting to look at a lot of that. And so by tilting these, several times a year, you gain about 5% in production. Yeah. So you just have to know what time of year to during the summer, the sun is up higher, so we flatten them out so they'll gain more. So.
Yeah, that's right. And so there is an added cost for the hardware to make those adjustments at the top of the pole over the base ground mount costs. And then the next type of ground mount that is possible is a tracker. So this is a 2-axis tracker. This is an all-earth renewable tracker. This is over at Bistro Henry's in Manchester. And these follow the sun all day. So they obviously have moving parts. They might add 6'4", so this array is 24 feet tall. They have quite a large view impact, but the footprint for the amount of power you're getting, the footprint's very small. So they're great if you have a small, sunny postage stamp of land and you want to get as much power production as you can possible. So I've done the analysis, and for a given location, they're about 40% more expensive in hardware costs to put in than a fixed mount, but they are 40% more productive on average than ground mounts. So if you do not have endless space to just put up more panels, a tracker could be a really good option. And then you always want to acknowledge that the moving parts in this design are warranted for 10 years, so they do need replacing, unlike sort of the steel fixed structure or your roof, which hopefully is in good shape when you start your solar installation. Anything you want to add about the tracker?
No, next.
All right.
So
and that brings us to modules.
The solar modules themselves, and actually the correct term is modules, not solar panels. Everyone talks about solar panels, but they're solar modules. And so what you're seeing now in the industry, I mean, there's constantly new, greater efficiencies, different technologies. So you're increasing, you're lowering the degradation. So typically, I mean, there's solar modules that are out there that are 40 years old and they're still working, but they're not putting out what they once were. So each year they degrade a little bit, the glass gets dirty, and so there's degradation. So most module manufacturers have started to decrease that degradation. So over the lifespan of 25 years, you're getting more power. In addition to that, you're starting to see, go to the next slide, I'll show you there's different technologies. Danielle can explain how Sunpower, what we're doing right now is we don't want to necessarily sell you on a particular product, but explain what some companies are doing to make their product better.
Yeah, so while you're looking at differentiating solar products, it's good to look at what they've done to address degradation. So for example, Sunpower, they have all of the wiring is on the back of the cell, so that increases production on the front of the cell. There's a copper plating in the middle to reduce AC wiring loss, which is a main source of panel failure, is like the mini connections between the cells are usually just like silver tape and some adhesive, and if they are lost, then that interrupts power flow through the cells. That can be a source of hot spots, like there will be electric resistance on the front of the cell, and can reduce production. So having a copper plating through the cell, removes that issue. If power can always flow through the cell, no matter if there are like minute wear and tear, and so it's just another way to extend the life of the product. And then there are other technologies that are making gains in efficiency, that Panasonic's bifacial cell design is one example. So they are actually bouncing light off of the back of the module and into the back side of the cell. So light can actually be captured on both sides of the cell, and it just increases the production capacity of a single module. So you can find out from every panel manufacturer that you're looking at, what makes their panels longer lived, or decreases their degradation, increases their performance, and those are unique things to look out for.
And it also allows all these companies to start, you're starting to see Sunpower had a 25-year warranty for the power that it's going to put out, the product itself and labor. And so you're starting to see other companies, REC now has a similar warranty, Panasonic has pretty close to the same warranty. So efficiencies are getting more robust, as are the warranties. So you'll still continue to see incremental increases in the module technology. And then we're going to talk about inverters. So as Danielle explained previously, the solar module itself is putting out DC power, and so we need inverters to turn that to AC power. On the left-hand side, there's a Fronius and an SMA inverter. So these are string inverters. What has happened in the industry is what they call rapid shutdown. And so it is now part of the National Electric Code that if you have solar on your roof and there's a power outage, your solar has to turn off within a certain fraction of a second. Since they're DC panels, they're putting out DC power. If you have a fire during the day and the fire department comes and takes out the meter or turns off power to your house, those modules are still putting out DC power. So by having module level electronics, and so on the screen here on the top is that's an N-phase microinverter. What that does is right at the module itself, it's turning it to AC power. So that microinverter will only work when the grid power is on. So as soon as they cut grid power to your solar, within a fraction of a second, it no longer puts out anything. So someone had put in the chat, what happens, how do you protect people working on the line? This is what happens. So it also serves as for shade mitigation. So what happens typically with a string inverter is if you have a string of 13 modules and you have shading on the lower right-hand side, then the whole string, if those 3 modules are operating at 30%, then the whole string is going to be operating at less than 100%. With individual microinverters on each one of those, each module becomes autonomous. So those 2 modules might be at 30%, but the rest of the string can operate at 100%. So microinverters they offer 2 benefits. One is for shade mitigation, and the other one is for rapid shutdown. And then on the lower right here is sort of a combination of the 2. And so depending on which manufacturer you speak to, the string inverters will tell you that they are the bee's knees, and the microinverter companies will tell you that they are. And then so SolarEdge will tell you that they actually are the best of both worlds. So it's pretty funny to hear. But so what they have is an inverter that you see on the right, and then a power optimizer. And so the optimizer is going to operate the same way. It's going to perform rapid shutdown, and then it's also going to help you with shade mitigation. And now any rooftop system you do with an SMA inverter, they also have power optimizers, and they can either have their own, the whole industry has had to scramble in the last couple of years for each company to come out with their own optimizers because of this rapid shutdown. So that's the various types of inverters that we have.
And to just highlight your question again, DJ, it is now National Electrical Code that any rooftop system must comply with rapid shutdown, so that utility line workers cannot be electrocuted, and that's why everyone has had to scramble, except Enphase. They were doing really well. And so, just as Bill said, it used to be that a whole string of these panels would be on one inverter. And that meant if one of them was underperforming, it's like your old Christmas lights, the whole string goes out and you have to figure out, which one is the problem. And we don't have to do that anymore, although I personally love that part of Christmas lights. But another benefit that module level electronics have is that it gives us the ability to pinpoint problems. And that actually improves warranty validation, because the company that sold you the solar can monitor, panel number 17 is underperforming and it's the microinverter, and you can have a product shipped to you and put up to replace anything that is not performing up to the standard of the warranty. And what makes that possible is a monitoring platform. So this would be a communications box that's installed near your electric panel that you must provide some internet access for, but it will show you, the consumer, the output, and both the production of your system and also the consumption in your home, so you can see how you're doing, and it also provides information for that warranty validation.
And this monitoring, and we'll see this with the batteries in a few seconds, the advancements made in inverter technology and the ability to have smart communications with that through your monitoring has helped installers as well as homeowners, because we can do some troubleshooting just through our monitoring portal and call up SolarEdge and say, hey, what happens with this one? And so a lot of times we're saving ourselves a truck roll to go look at it. When John talks about off-grid stuff later on, there's a lot more places where homeowners might be able to tinker with the system, and with a monitoring device, you can actually say, oh, at what point did you change the voltage setting? So the monitoring gives us the ability to actually see what's going on in the system day by day.
Yep.
And so I'll just describe net metering. So now we know how the solar and the inverters work and how they're feeding into your system. So basically, you can see that the sun is creating the DC power, and then it's going to an inverter, and that's feeding into your service panel. And so during the day, it will, if you generate 300 kilowatt hours that day and you use 200 during that same time, it's going to offset all of your loads. You're basically going to be running your house off of your solar, but you actually generated 100 extra. So it's actually going to kick that into the grid. So what you do is you have next to your existing meter becomes your net meter. Below that is your solar meter. That's going to tell you how many kilowatt hours you produced. And so that'll give you a tally for the month. Here's what you've been producing. Because of this net metering, what you can do is we look at how many kilowatt hours you need for 12 months. How many did you use in 12 months? And we know that in December, in January, your solar is not going to produce very much at all. But from April to November, you can actually produce more than you use. So we size the system knowing that all during those months, you're feeding back into the grid and you're getting credits on your bill. And so then in the winter, when the sun disappears, you can actually use those credits. So you develop a net metering bank. So that's how it works for individual house. The other thing to know about net metering is that the solar doesn't have to be where the credits are going. So I have a bunch of solar modules up on my garage roof. I can send all those credits over to Danielle's meter. She lives in another town. I can actually split them. I can say I want 50% of them used here, and then I'm going to send her 50% of it. So that would be group net metering. So anytime you see a bunch of solar modules out in the field, those credits are being allocated somewhere. They're feeding into the grid, and then whoever owns those gets to decide where they get to be allocated. So I think a lot of people don't understand that, you don't have to, if you don't have a good roof, you may actually still have the capability to do solar, because you can do it on another property or your neighbor's property. And I'll show you an example of a couple who did that.
And I just want to acknowledge that we have some folks on here who are not from Vermont. So we are going to mostly speak to Vermont because that's where we install. But net metering is going to have specifics for each of your locations that you're going to want to look up. I recommend the Desire USA website, which lists all of the renewable incentives for every state. And you can find out what rules apply in your area. So in Vermont, the credits are only good for 12 months and you cannot cash them out. In other states, you can get paid like a wholesale rate for your power beyond a certain point. So overproducing could make sense in some places. And no matter where you live, it's the net metering policy that's going to determine the value of your solar. We live in Vermont. It's not the sunniest place, it's not Arizona, but we have really good net metering policy. So generally when we meet with a bunch of people back in the before times when we used to go to conferences, there would be people from Delaware and Oregon. What are your net metering policies there? Because that's going to determine the financial aspects of your solar. Okay. And so the starting point for anyone who's considering solar is how good is your site? So this tool is a solar pathfinder. It's kind of a fisheye lens, similar to a tool that foresters use to measure canopy structure, but we're doing it to find the path of the sun for every hour of the year. And so, it's good to have just kind of an analysis of, where the sun hits. You might not be aware that even though your roof seems very sunny, it actually is shaded until 10 a.m. in the morning, through the summer months. And that might actually impact your production if you choose to go with that location. So getting a shade analysis can be really helpful, especially in determining whether, it's a good site for solar and if, you know, maybe like one tree that's in the way needs to be trimmed or cut down, that can be of great assistance. One thing that we do when we're designing a system is after we've taken our measurements, we model on a computer the pitch of your roof, the compass direction, the azimuth that it's facing, and use 25 years of weather data from your location to determine how much a system on that roof is going to produce. So, you know, we can actually get pretty accurate as far as, you know, what your needs might be and how to meet those. And then, you know, it goes from the design to the reality.
And so then as part of that evaluation, next slide, we talk to you about what your energy consumption is. And so we look at what your electric bill is, but also how do you heat your house? How do you drive? So my wife and I looked at the vehicles we were driving. Next slide. And we figured out that since we had solar up on our barn, we could actually drive it. We had a 2013 Nissan Leaf, and now we've moved up to a 2019. So we literally drive by the power that we generate from our solar. So, you know, what we wanted to do is figure out how to remove fossil fuels from our diet. And so we talked, you know, we've eliminated actually now two of our internal combustion engines. We looked at how we heat our house. So the next slide, you can talk to electricians or plumbers who will install cold climate heat pumps. So you're looking at your whole portfolio of consumption and saying, can we put it on the electric side and power it with solar?
That's right. And so for folks who are in the Northeast here, you know, a fuel bill or a propane bill is a big expense, but also a big component of your carbon footprint. And being able to use an efficient electric heating system like the cold climate heat pumps is going to reduce that bill, but also switch it off of fuel to solar electric, and then you can add more panels to run your heat system. And I have to say, I just got heat pumps installed this week, and my house has been incredibly hot for the past month, but these cold climate heat pumps do both AC and heating, and they are 300% efficient, which means whatever your fuel bill is currently, divide that by 3, and that's how much it's going to increase your electric bill, unless you do solar, in which case you're going to be powering it yourself. So I highly recommend them. The only thing you want to do is keep a backup system for the very, very coldest days of the year. So that might be like 1 week per year, that the condenser is actually less efficient than that. It will still work, but it has to heat itself up first. If it's, you know, if it's a negative 20-degree day, it's going to have to do a lot of work to heat itself up and then heat your house up.
And so now that we've talked about what solar can do for you while it's running and while it's feeding into the grid, we'll talk about what happens when the grid turns off. So batteries. This could actually be a whole other separate workshop. So I'm going to kind of try and condense this into a quick discussion. But pictured here in the center are traditional lead acid batteries. They've been around for a long time, and they've been steadfast, if not, you know, necessarily the best technology. Now they have sealed lead acid batteries, so they're less messy. You don't have to, you know, constantly be checking specific gravity and maintaining them. So even the lead acid battery technology has improved, but we've also moved on to lithium ion batteries. And to the left-hand side, we have Tesla Powerwall, because everybody in Vermont knows them. Green Mountain Power has entered into a program to try and put Tesla Powerwalls everywhere. I won't go into all of my reasons for all of the other ones that I prefer, but I will say that I prefer a lithium iron phosphate battery, which has no thermal runaway. And that's what all these other batteries that I'm going to talk to you about are lithium iron phosphate. Tesla still has cobalt in their batteries, and I don't love that for a number of reasons. To the right-hand side, up above, is the Sonnen battery. So they put together the battery, inverter, and everything all in one. You're going to start to see other companies that are doing that also to make one sort of energy management system. We've installed a number of those in Vermont. In the middle, Simplified batteries, another lithium iron phosphate battery. Those are interesting because they are almost the same size as a lead acid battery. So when people want to get rid of their old nasty lead acid batteries, we will replace 48 batteries with 6 of these. So it makes for a much cleaner environment. They also do have some cases now, just like Sonnen, they've started to do something similar. And then on the bottom left-hand side, I see my friend Olaf is here with us today from Blue Planet Energy. This is Blue Ion battery pack that they have. Again, lithium ion. And then to the right is Fortress Power. So other companies are coming in with like 18 kilowatt hours worth of batteries in a case. You can stack them. What's interesting about lithium ion batteries, with a lead acid battery, if you wanted to expand the size of your battery system, if your batteries were 3 years old and you brought in new lead acid batteries, then what would happen is they would default to the degradation of the other batteries. With a lithium ion, if you want to add capacity, you can, and it won't do any damage during the batteries.
And I want to name here that we're focusing on grid-tied battery backup systems mainly in this discussion. And the next presentation is going to go over off-grid battery systems, which have to be designed with some additional parameters in mind, and they're larger systems. So lead acid may be more appropriate for those. And lead acid recycling has really improved. So that is a very, and they've mitigated the environmental impact on the lead acid battery. But yeah, for most of these batteries here, they can be set up with an inverter for AC to DC transfer in a bidirectional fashion. So these batteries are storing DC power and converting it to AC when you want to use it in your home, and accepting solar coming off of the roof. So if you have microinverters on your system, any of these AC coupled batteries will work with it because they all have inverters tied to them.
And typically these batteries are agnostic to what solar you have. Like Danielle was saying, they're AC coupling, so they're just taking the AC power that your inverter is putting out, and that's what it's using. You can also set up, it's much more efficient to just set up a DC coupling system, but we're not going to get into all the design parameters right now. But Danielle's going to show you what a typical hookup looks like. Again, we're not promoting Sonnen batteries, but we're just showing this. This happens to be a Sonnen battery in the center of this, just to show you that you've got your solar coming into your essential loads, and that's
right. So yeah, so this is a typical diagram for how the solar is wired into the battery. So you have your solar will come into a sub panel, and you will wire that sub panel with loads that you plan to run when the power goes out. These are your protected loads or your essential loads. So that would be things like a well pump if you're here in the Northeast, a fridge and or a chest freezer. Maybe it's the furnace switch from your heat system and some lights that you don't want to go out. And those will be run off of the solar during the day. The solar will charge up the battery. The solar will transfer out to your main service panel and then to the grid. And then when the power goes down, you will have the solar and the battery powering just the protected loads panel. And when the battery drains to a certain threshold, you can actually set it so that you can keep the battery from draining too far, just in case you have an unexpected outage, so that you still have enough juice to run your loads during an outage until the solar can top the battery off again. So and one thing we didn't add to this slide, but should mention, is the possibility of integrating a generator with the battery. So you can have a generator and a solar battery on an automatic transfer switch. And so if your battery drains and the sun has not come out yet, it can actually kick on the generator to top off this battery.
So this slide is basically showing you, here the consumption in your house. Typically in the morning, everyone's getting ready for breakfast. I think COVID may have changed this curve a little bit. There's probably a lot more usage in the middle of the day, but that's when the sun is out. So I want to talk here about the different settings you can put your battery on. So basically the battery has an energy management system. You can have it so it's just as a backup. So you lose power, it's going to power your essential loads. The next day the sun comes out, the sun will recharge the battery, and you can go on like that for days. Or another mode that you can do is called time of use. So in a lot of places in Vermont, people pay more per kilowatt hour during certain hours of the day. So what you can do is you can tell your battery, say, from 7 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock in the morning, when I'm paying twice as much for my electricity, I don't want to draw from the grid. I want to draw from my battery. So it'll draw from the battery, and then same thing in the evening. It's depending on what the time of use is. So they call that rate arbitrage. You're doing some energy management. You're using your battery. You're drawing from your battery when the electricity is really expensive, and then when it cuts in half, then you can recharge your battery. What you want to beware of is what Danielle was just describing. Is you want to make sure that while you're doing these settings, if you see that there's a weather event coming, you may want to put it into backup mode, because you don't want to catch your battery at 50% state of charge and then lose power. So you got to keep typically for most of these systems, it's easy to switch. But self-consumption is another mode that people want to just say, instead of paying my utility at night, I'd prefer to run my house off of my battery, off of my solar power at night. So I'm running my house off of solar during the day. I also want to do that at night. So you drain from your battery. Same thing, you don't want to leave it short if you have something coming, but what happens is then you start to draw less power from the utility, and now your battery's starting to actually pay for itself because you're consuming your own energy. And that's next. So this is an example of a couple, TJ and George, who they've taken advantage of every type of system that we just talked about. So they only needed 24 solar modules to cover the electricity usage in their house, but they knew that they were going to be, in a year or two, getting heat pumps and electric cars. So they put 12 extra modules. What they do with net metering is they take a third of their energy and they sell it to their neighbor. So their neighbor was paying 15 cents a kilowatt hour. They tell her, tell you what, when you get those credits, you give us 12 cents. So she's saving 20% off her electric bill. They're getting paid for the energy that they're using, because they also get an adder, which Vermont has, and I won't get into all those details, but, and then they also got this Sonnen battery. So they're all set when the power goes out. As it turns out, it goes out a lot in this particular town in Londonderry. So they are, they're enjoying their net metering and their battery.
And this is another customer, is Heino and Darlene, and they also live in an area with high outages. And so they're their solar and battery can run the property when the power goes out pretty frequently, including 2 weeks after the system was installed, when a freak weather event, that bomb cyclone, happened. So you can actually see on the monitoring readout here, we have the solar every day, and the blue is their battery, or their consumption in their home. And then you can see in red exactly when their power cut out and the battery kicked right on and discharged during the storm. So they were running their house off of their battery as if there was no grid outage present.
And then this is another system. He actually had a whole wall where you see the inverters hung there. There's a whole wall of lead acid batteries on this rack. And so we replaced that. These are Simplified batteries. He just built a little bench to go over them. Again, there's no off gassing with these batteries, so you don't have to worry about venting or anything like that. And so he's got a whole home with his Sunpower solar there.
Yeah, and another thing to consider here is, if you have a lot of outages, for him, he needed a lot of batteries because there are sometimes multi-day outages in his location. And so this number of batteries was sufficient for him to run his property on for 3 days of autonomy, charging up with the solar to this battery bank for 3 days in a grid outage. And then as far as other use cases for a battery, so there are also utilities are starting to get on board with the concept of grid management using batteries. So this is happening in Germany. It's starting to happen in the US. So in Vermont, Green Mountain Power is getting on board with this idea. So you can actually, your battery can start to pay for itself if you allow the utility to draw from your battery. GMP has this very specific program we're not going to go into the details on. You can get a rebate upfront if you commit to allow them to draw, a few times a month from your battery to help with peak management. So it's just a way for the battery to start paying for itself.
And so then we get into, so that was all of the stationary built-in battery storage technologies that are happening. Another one that we're not going to get into in this discussion here is vehicle to grid. So when I plug my electric vehicle into my building, I could, in Japan, they're doing it. They're sending, it's bi-directional energy. We're not there yet in Vermont, in the US. I'm interested to see where that goes. But we also have a lot of these portable, the one thing with the battery technology, and I actually, someone had said in this one discussion that we were having about batteries and how they're changing our life, these phones that we have, we got rid of the cord. So everything became portable. And so now we've got these portable lithium-ion batteries that, in this particular case, this is a wood pellet stove that we have in our house. We lost power. Well, we just plugged it into this little portable, this is a 3,000 watt Goal Zero Yeti, and it runs our pellet stove for all night, plus our refrigerator. So you're starting to see more and more of these having a little bit more capability. Some of them are smaller and they're just for charging your cell phones. But in emergency situations, when they had the California wildfires last year, they sold out of every one of these batteries. And then the next one is Simplify also has we call it sunshine in a suitcase, because you can charge these with your solar, and then it's a lithium-ion battery. So that is a propane heater that we have upstairs in an upstairs apartment that we have. And when it was 22 or 28 below zero, it was really cold last winter, I ran this propane heater and the refrigerator in this apartment for 36 hours. I just want to see how long it would, what the capacity of it was. So, it's pretty robust. We take it out into the field with us if we need power out in the field, because we don't have a spiffy electric truck with an outlet on it. So instead we bring our suitcase full of power and run the cement mixer with that. So you're starting to see more and more of, these lithium ion making your power portable. And we're starting to run out of time, so we're just going to rip through a few more slides. But mainly, why should you do it? Is because you just put it up there, it just keeps working. And also, I think you should do it for the planet. Everybody does this for different reasons, but I think we're trying to save the planet, which is why I got into this business. Some of our customers do that. Having said that, some of their customers do it just for the money. And so if you could do it so that you eliminate your electric bill. In a lot of, like, now we're starting so that we cannot eliminate our entire electric bill, but in some places you can. So I think that's a perfectly legitimate reason to do that as well.
And solar is also increasing the value of a home for a resale. Anyone who's looking at a property right now is asking us, can I put solar up here? So it's reducing the need for one more utility bill, and that is absolutely valuable. So really this varies by market. So in some places it could be more than this. And you are seeing also various mechanisms for financing these systems. I won't go into the details, but you can have a zero upfront solar that takes into account all of the incentives locally. So it's worth asking your local credit unions what they do to finance solar. It's an asset. It's not. It appreciates in value instead of depreciating. We're going to go real quickly into frequently asked questions and just rip through these. Snow removal, you're not going to need it because as soon as the sun comes out, it is going to melt that bottom layer and then the snow will shed off of your panels. So we'd rather you didn't remove snow on the panels. You could damage them.
We did have one woman say that she would climb up, stand on top of her railing and a ladder and reach up, and I'm like, no, don't do that.
Do not.
When we make projections for what your system is going to produce throughout the year, it's based on the pitch of your roof and your longitude and latitude. So if you have a flat roof in Vermont, we know it's not going to produce much in the winter, but we've sized it so that it will overproduce in the summer to make up for that. So yeah, don't, what I do on mine, below all my solar array, I have about a foot of shingles that are exposed. I clean the snow off of that. So then as the snow comes off the solar panels, there's nothing to block it. But yeah.
And then for Vermont customers, they're asking, why do I still have a bill? And if you see all of these things that are circled, those the power companies have decided are non-bypassable charges, which means that you are still going to be paying, if you get new solar now, you're still going to have something that you have to pay, even if you have credits. The non-bypassable charges cannot be paid with net metering credits. So they are really just, fees for administration, billing, and for storm management, things like that. They'll highlight them in green for you. And the federal income tax credit is disappearing. So this year, 26% of your system installation costs can be claimed as a tax credit. Next year, 22% of your residential system costs can be claimed as a tax credit. And then in 2022, it's 0%, and a permanent 10% for commercial customers.
So elections matter, and
yes,
we need to see if that tax credit can get extended, but we'll see.
That's right.
And then a discussion about solar shingles, because people always ask, and Tesla is doing their thing. And we did have one person who's on the call today ask about it. So the development of solar shingles, people have been working on it for 20 years, probably longer. They're expensive and inefficient. There are some places where that might not matter to people because in this particular request that we had, it was in a historic district, and could they replace slate with solar shingles? I don't know about what that permitting looks like, if a historic district is going to say, oh, that's okay. But I do know that, so what happens is if I put 10 kilowatt of solar, if I have say 20 solar panels up on my roof, there are 19 electrical connections. If I put 400 shingles up on my roof, there are 399 electrical connections.
Mm-hmm.
And if I find out that one of my solar modules up on the roof is bad, I can go take it down. If we have 400 shingles, it's going to be really hard to replace that one. I don't even want to know what that operations and maintenance looks like.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that when we mount solar panels up on a roof, they're raised up off the roof with hardware. We have L-feet and rails, and it raises it up, which causes air to cool the panels. Solar panels don't actually like to be hot. They work better in cool weather and sun. And so that cool air helps them become more efficient. Here, you can see this is an example of a setup, and they do try and allow for a little bit of air underneath that, but you know how hot your attic gets, and so that's what you're looking at. So there's inefficiencies. It's expensive. I had my brother-in-law is a stockbroker, and he keeps texting me about Tesla, and he said, hey, they tripled their installations in California on shingles. And I said, oh, you mean they went from 1 to 3? They've been slowly rolling it out very slowly, and I don't want to be facetious because I do think there are places where it might actually work, but it's still a technology that's not really compelling.
And the efficiency, because it's built into this envelope, the heat causes a lot of electrical resistance. The efficiency is about 13% compared to panels are in the 20 to 22% efficient range currently. So that's a big difference with an existing technology. So it's going to be more efficient. And then these are specific incentives for Vermont. These are changing by the minute, folks. And so we just wanted to highlight the current net metering rate and adjuster. This is only really applicable until September 1st or so. At some point after August 17th, net metering rates are being revised. So we actually have no idea going forward beyond the next couple months what that is going to look like. Keep your ear to the ground. Currently, the federal tax credit, the 26%, runs out December 31st. So if your system is not operational by December 31st, you will be claiming your tax credit in 2020 for the tax year of 2021. Vermont businesses can get a Vermont state tax credit, and they can also apply depreciation to the system equipment.
And the main thing to keep in mind with incentives, we have people all the time say, well, solar's getting more efficient, the prices are coming down, maybe I should wait. And what happens with the incentives is they don't go up. So, I had one couple ask about doing this rooftop, and I went back 3 years later and evaluated, and they said, oh, are the incentives the same? And I did the math, and they lost $9,000 by waiting for 3 years. I did not tell them how much they would have lost. But so my point is that the incentives aren't going up. They're taking them away. So the best time to do solar is yesterday, but today is good too. I wouldn't necessarily wait till next July. A lot of places you can get grandfathered in. So in Vermont, if we have people sign paperwork by September 1st, then they'll be grandfathered in, and they have 12 months to do it. But so just do it.